Good evening, this is Hound Dog Steve reporting to you on a story which is, well, how can I say this? This is probably as low as it gets. And the reason I wanted to do this story is because someone mentioned something to me, a friend of mine, about Pizzagate and how completely false it was, and the danger of false news or fake news and the real consequences as such. And having gone through the Jimmy Savile experience, and we'll get through to that in a second, I started to do a little research online, and this is the most recent find. This is by Before It's News, and this is a largest pedophile ring in history. 70,000 members, heads of state, the rats scramble. Okay, so this is millions read the news today, the pedophile ring busted, or the earlier article of how the FBI actually ran it for several weeks, expanding it, drawing in tens of thousands. This is unbelievable. Of course, this video here is Boys Town, the official trailer. The rumours became more than rumours when Bush 43 took office and brought with him, according to a high-level White House informant, a virtual army of neocon pedophiles and Nancy boys who set the tone for 8 years of crushed civil liberties, staged economic crashes, and the dirtiest of wars in America's history. And of course, since President Trump has taken office, massive pedophile ring busted, 230 kids saved, US News, crime courts, that's NBC News. Here we have an internet pedophile ring with up to 70,000 members, thought to be the world's largest, has been uncovered by police, as security officials said Wednesday. Suspects that 230 children abused in 30 countries had been taken to safety. More children are expected to be found, Europol said. What isn't being told is that this same organisation, also known as the Red Circle, runs through secret societies around the world, which would be Bilderberg, St. Hubertus, Federalist Society, Knights of Malta, Council on Foreign Relations, Federal Reserve Bank, NATO, Royal Families of Belgium and Netherlands, and SCOTUS, which is the Supreme Court of the United States. Okay, so where did I start with this? That's the most recent. But I remember this from a while ago. A man without shame, how can sex scandal F1 boss Max Mosley paint himself as the injured party? Okay, now this guy Max Mosley is the head of the European Racing Association, and he was caught in a 5-hour sex session with 5 female prostitutes in a Nazi-style orgy. Okay, 68-year-old head of motor racing's governing body has fiercely defended his actions, calling them merely eccentric. Okay, so he's fighting this case. This is his father here, Sir Oswald, and Max Mosley, as a younger man, obviously. Okay, in an interview last weekend with the Sunday Telegraph, he said, "I think most adults would say that whatever in that spectrum somebody does, provided it doesn't hurt anybody, provided it's consensual, provided it's amongst adults, provided it's in private, it concerns nobody but the people doing it." The Urbain Mosley, who had built a considerable reputation as president of the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, FIA, doesn't deny paying £2,500 for his sadomasochistic exploits, but he insists it is entirely false to suggest there was a Nazi element to his orgy. "It's a matter of principle for Max," said one of the Oxford-educated former racing driver's friends this week. "I can't believe the irony of that statement." Okay, so there he is here as an older man. Of course, he's just declared himself as being gay, and he's left his wife and gone off to live with his lover. But where is it here? Okay, for Mosley has got connections that stretch to the very top of the Labour government. He is close, for example, to disgraced Minister Peter Hain, who was forced to step down after failing to declare contribution to his campaign for the deputy leadership of the Labour Party. So here we have someone with really connections to the upper echelon caught in a rather sordid situation. And now this is at a later date, because there is a picture here, and it said, were it not for his family history, the British media might eventually have dismissed the Nazi-themed sex romp of internationally motor racing chief Max Mosley as just another instance of British upper-class bad taste. Even Prince Harry, remember, showed up at a costume party 3 years ago in a military uniform with a swastika armband. Okay, so but Mosley, the urbane president of the body that governs Formula One racing, is under increasing pressure to resign after following revelations of a sex scandal involving prostitutes, sadomasochism, and alleged Nazi-style role-playing. That pressure may reflect the brand concerns of the mass marketing automakers involved in the Grand Prix racings. But the fact that Mosley's parents were high-profile Hitler fans may have intensified the media clamour. Okay, last Sunday, the British tabloid News of the World posted video footage on its website of Mosley and 5 prostitutes in what is frothily described as a depraved Nazi-style orgy in a torture dungeon. In the secretly filmed video, the paper reports Mosley barks orders in German as he whips 2 hookers dressed in striped uniforms reminiscent of Auschwitz garb, while girls in Nazi uniforms look on. The video, which has been removed from the newspaper's website, also captures a prostitute commanding Mosley to strip before she inspects his head and genitals for lice, which the paper suggests was mocking the humiliating ways Jews were treated by SS death camps guards in World War II. Placed in chains, Mosley leans over a torture bench and whimpers as a dominatrix strikes him with a rod, saying, "You are going to be shown how we treat prisoners in our facility." Later, when Mosley takes hold of a whip, he states that a blonde inmate needs more of the punishment. Mosley, one of the most powerful men in the multi-billion-dollar sport of Grand Prix racing, admits to participating in the orgy but denies that his fantasy had any Nazi or concentration camp connotations. He spoke German, he said, simply because it was the native language of the women involved in the erotic rendezvous. Okay, so let's step over here. These are pictures of Prince Charles with Jimmy Savile, and you can see him here in several. Very close. Oh, here's Jimmy with the Pope. Isn't that nice? It's all for the boys. Yeah, we know. Jimmy was quite the guy, let me tell you. Now, what's interesting about Jimmy Savile is I grew up through this era, and Jimmy Savile was basically a folk hero. He started Top of the Pops. He was, wow, everything to everybody. He had this thing, here it is right here, Jim Fixed It For Me. It's called Jim Will Fix It. And this was basically like a Children's Wish Foundation, which brought him into contact with many children. And here he is with his buddy Rolf Harris. Not a very good picture there. Here he is with Margaret Thatcher. And Margaret Thatcher, it's interesting, she nominated him for the OBE. Ted Heath, just the tip of the iceberg. Elite Satanism, VIP, child abuse. So yes, Jimmy Savile. Jimmy Savile. Okay, so here we are. Charles, biography. Eight most intriguing disclosures about Prince of Wales. Prince Charles trusted Jimmy Savile on everything from marriage guidance to checking speeches, among biographer Catherine Mayer's claims. And don't you just love that jacket? Fresh evidence of the extent to which the Prince of Wales relied on Jimmy Savile as a confidant and advisor is revealed for the first time in a controversial royal biography published later this week. The Prince asked Savile to read over his speeches and to provide his thoughts on how they might be improved, as well as asking his advice on matters to do with health policy. Charles, The Heart of a King, by the journalist Catherine Mayer, explores the relationship between the Prince and Savile, now known to have abused hundreds of children. Savile, who died in 2011, was for years a visitor to Highgrove and St James's Palace. He also had the run of Stoke Mandeville Hospital, Leeds General Infirmary and Broadmoor, which to the Prince made Savile an obvious person to tap for advice on navigating Britain's health authorities. This is from the Telegraph, by the way. Again, from the Telegraph, Jimmy Savile, a truly grim fairy story. When Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm wrote their first book of folk tales in the 1812, the stories were aimed at adults, not children. They were crammed full of sexually deviant undertones and events that had often, in Coleridge's phrases, motiveless malignity. Only those with the strongest stomachs could read the original tales today, nothing like the bland Disney-fied stories we now tell our children. In Rapunzel, the prince is blinded with thorns. In Snow White, the hunter is told to scoop out her liver and her lungs. Even Cinderella sees the ugly sisters maim themselves by cutting off their toes and heels to fit the glass slipper. I thought of such malignity this week when Jimmy Savile became more than a prolific predatory sex offender and turned into a gothic monstrosity that even the Grimm brothers would struggle to imagine. We were already aware of the dreadful catalogue of Savile's deeds outside hospitals, yet these new revelations revealed by the Telegraph 2 years ago brought his crimes to a new level, abuse of both the living and the dead. In many papers, an image of a grinning Savile stared out. He is dressed in a purple tracksuit, gulping down food, while on his wedding finger is a bulbous ring he boasted was made from the glass eye of a corpse from Leeds Infirmary mortuary. Another photograph shows him cigar in mouth, one hand on hip, the other brandishing a leather belt with a selection of keys outside the same hospital. So this guy is an absolute predator. After his death, something like 350 adults came forward immediately and complained of the fact that not only did he rape them and attack them, but he sold them and traded them amongst other celebrities and other high-profile individuals. And here we go, Jeffrey Epstein, the billionaire pedophile, with links to Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, Robert Maxwell, and Prince Andrew. Here he is. A list of people who have associated with Jeffrey Epstein over the years would take in the world of celebrity, science, politics, and royalty. Over the years, the casually dressed, globe-trotting financier who said to log more than 600 flying hours a year has been linked with Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker, and Manhattan Society figure Ghislaine Maxwell, daughter of the late media titan Robert Maxwell. Okay, so this is retiring head of FBI tells it all, Illuminati Satanism, pedophile rings. I'm going to link that below. Okay. Lord Coke top peers drug binges with $200 prostitutes. Okay, this guy is a peer. He's a part of the House of Lords, a married peer in charge of upholding standards in the House of Lords, has been caught on video snorting cocaine with a pair of $200 a night hookers. Baron John Sewell, 69, Deputy Speaker of the Lords and once a key ally of ex-PM Tony Blair, stripped naked for one sleazy romp at his rent-protected London flat. Last month he was also pictured snorting coke with hookers at a sordid sex party after asking, "What about trying the big one?" The peer in charge of upholding standards in the House of Lords sniffed the Class A drug from one of the girl's breasts, and he told the women, each paid $200 for the session at his rent-protected London flat, "I just want to be led astray." And here we go. But the Lord, who has a $1.2 million house in Aberdeen, cut a less respectable figure as he enjoyed a seedy romp at his flat in Dolphin Square, notorious for a string of parliamentary scandals. So here we go again at the very top. This is the point I'm actually making through all of this. These people are the people who are in charge of your world. Okay? These people are in charge of the welfare of the citizens, the duty of care to the public. Do you really think this man cares about the public? Or Jeffrey Epstein? Or Jimmy Savile? We're going to look at this. This is the New York Times. Belgium pedophilia scandal. Did authorities cover up its scope? Book revives fear of grand conspiracy. In Brussels, the X-Files refer not to the US television series, but to a series of horrific witness accounts of an alleged pedophile network. The 5 women and the male transvestite who testified anonymously in Belgium under the code name X described an underworld of snuff movies and sadomasochistic torture that was almost impossible to believe, and they said that politicians and other highly placed members of society were involved. The conventional wisdom is that the witnesses were either deranged or were recounting fantasies. It was, in the jargon of psychiatrists, a bad case of false memory syndrome. But a new book by 3 crime reporters, The X-Files, What Belgium Was Not Supposed to Know About the Dutroux Affair, published in French and Dutch in November, asserts that the ex-witnesses were more credible than the conventional wisdom suggests. The book draws copiously from police files, transcriptions of the ex-witnesses' evidence, the findings of a parliamentary commission, and other sources. Even if the way the ex-witnesses testified seems irrational, the authors say, many of the facts they described stand up to scrutiny. Okay, Jerry Sandusky's son arrested on child sex abuse charges. Jerry Sandusky, the adopted son of convicted child molester and former Penn State assistant football coach Jerry Sandusky, has been arrested in Pennsylvania on charges of sexually abusing a child, multiple outlets are reporting. Okay, this is SalemNews.com. This is a story you may have heard of. Here are the really disturbing details. Those who deny the possibility of government deception on a large scale should examine the story of Boys Town and a black Republican politician named Lawrence Larry King. For many, King and Boys Town are synonymous with a scandal involving child sex and drug abuse that officials in London, Nebraska were able to suppress and effectively cover up. Absolutely amazing. Boys Town, the White House and the devil. So connected to the political world was King that upon his parole he was recruited into the National Republican Party. King's strategy, like that of MKUltra, was to target political figures to ensure anonymity and continued financial support from legislation by using children from Boys Town and others kidnapped to compromise influential men and women. These political figures would be photographed and videotaped engaging in drug taking and various sexual activity with minors. I mean, this is just beyond the pale. Grand jury says abuse stories were a carefully crafted hoax. And we know now that that was all incorrect. Vatican's secret life. Naked but for the towel around his waist, a man of a certain age sat by himself, bent slightly forward as if praying in a corner of a sauna at a gym in central Rome. I had not met this man before, but as I entered the sauna, I thought I recognized him from photographs. He looked like a priest with whom I corresponded after mutual friends put us in touch, a man I had wanted to consult about gay clerics in the Vatican Curia. My friends told me this priest was gay, politically savvy, and well connected to the gay church hierarchy of Rome. So here we go. I will leave you the links to all of this stuff. And of course here we have the Catholic Church sexual abuse cases. This is from Wikipedia, of course. Cases of sexual abuse, particularly of children, and subsequent cover-ups committed during the 20th and 21st centuries by Catholic priests, nuns, and members of the Roman Catholic orders, have led to numerous allegations, investigations, trials, and convictions. The abused include boys and girls, some as young as 3 years old. Are you hearing that? 3 years old, with the majority between the ages of 11 and 14. And of course, one of the things that happened is that cases have been brought against members of the Catholic hierarchy who covered up sex abuse allegations on seminary formations and through moving allegedly abusive priests to other parishes where abuse is sometimes continued. And here we have, look at this over here, just right here, graffiti on a Lisbon wall depicting a priest chasing 2 children. Catholic sex abuse cases in the United States. A series of lawsuits, criminal prosecutions and scandals over sex abuse by Roman Catholic clergy. Louisiana priest pled guilty to 11 counts of molestation of boys. It was again brought to national attention when a number of books on the topic were published in the 1990s and again in 2002, following a series of publications by the Boston Globe. And of course we can't leave the nuns out. Here are some photographs of the Magdalene laundries, and these were basically unwed mothers who were taken in by the nuns, and they were supposed to be given an education and shown how to become young ladies. However, they unfortunately faced long-term incarceration and became slaves of the nuns. Okay, here are some of the survivors. These women did nothing more than they got pregnant out of wedlock. Okay, and of course there was many accusations of sexual abuse, being sold for sex to the highest bidder, and all of this kind of stuff. And of course here we are, 800 bodies of babies found in septic tank at former Irish home for unwed mothers. From 1925 to 1961, this home in Tuam Island was where thousands of unwed mothers and their illegitimate children were sent to pay for penance for their out-of-wedlock pregnancies in the form of indentured servitude overseen by Catholic nuns. Like the Magdalene laundries, which are also run by the Catholic Church, the home's treatment of these women, girls and their babies was abusive, with mums and children often kept separate from each other and ostracized by the surrounding community. Now, 5 decades after the home was shut down and destroyed, the remains of 800 babies, the children of those women whose only crime was getting pregnant out of wedlock. According to callers, the found documents suggest that malnutrition and neglect killed many of the children, whilst others died of measles, convulsions, TB, gastroenteritis and pneumonia, according to Irish Central, a 1944 local health board report, describe the home's children as emaciated, pot-bellied, fragile, and with flesh hanging loosely on limbs. When these innocent children perished, their bodies were dumped like trash without gravestones or coffins. And to remind you, those responsible were Catholic nuns working on behalf of the Catholic Church, which stigmatized unwed mothers and their children as ruined. What would Jesus Christ think? And here another girl slave of Catholic Magdalene asylums to receive compensation, but not from the Church. Okay, let me see. Worse, for over 100 years, beatings and sexual abuse are thought to have been endemic. And you didn't have to be a sex worker to qualify to be saved by God's representatives on earth, by the 1870s asylum candidates. Extended beyond prostitutes to unmarried mothers, mentally retarded women, and abused girls, even young girls who were considered too promiscuous and flirtatious or too beautiful, were sent to an asylum by their families. The nuns were known to forge their school reports and to send those to the girls' relatives to conceal that their charges had been turned into slave labour. Recalls one former resident, "We never saw daylight or heard music, and it was normal for girls to fall ill and never be seen again. Sometimes we used massive industrial irons to press sheets for local hotels. They were raging hot, and you had to concentrate hard to make sure your hands didn't get caught. The steam nearly took your skin off. In the end, we got used to getting burned. It was part of everyday life." If it didn't take much to be sent to one of these hellholes, getting out wasn't so easy. So this is a horrible story. And again, I will link this below, so you don't think that I am just making this up, because I can assure you it is not made up. Take a look, here's another one. The Telegraph, the alleged pedophile ring at the heart of the British establishment. Investigation into alleged child abuse rings in Westminster dogged by claims of cover-ups and missing files. Home Secretary announces child abuse review. Savile concerned over lost abuse files. David Cameron hired Lord Britain as a 500-day trade advisor. More than 10 politicians on a list held by police investigating Westminster pedophile ring. Tebbit, possible government cover-up of child abuse. Whitehall, child sex inquiry, the 114 files lost. So this is rampant in our ruling classes. I'm not saying that all, but certainly a significant number. And we can see here that why would this be any different in Washington? Whitehall and Washington. Why would this be any different? The Vatican. Why would this be any different? And one of the reasons I'm doing this video is because I believe we have to snap out of the trance that we are in by allowing these people to be in charge of sensitive issues like security, like the welfare of its citizens, other sensitive issues like OHIP, hospitals, those caring agencies. If a person cannot decide between right and wrong when it comes to hurting, maiming or injuring a child, what possible moral judgment can they bring to bear on things that really need deep care? Okay, so there is enough there to make a difference within government. And I honestly think that you must have zero empathy if you can't get this, if you can't understand why it is inherently wrong to interfere with our future generations. You know, one of the bizarre statistics that I came across a while ago is that every abused child, predominantly male of course, will go on to abuse 10 other people in their lives. So you can see the exponential effect that would be having on our whole society. And these people, of course, want to gravitate to positions of power and control because, you know, when are you and I going to be on the board of an orphanage? Okay. It's interesting. I remember a few years back there was a woman called Terry Jean Bedford, and she was a dominatrix in North Toronto, and she was charged by the police with running a boarding house. And anyway, she was outside of the court being interviewed by the television and one of the news channels, and she said, well, I can't really understand this because, you know, these people who are charging me, they're my customers. She said, who else can afford to pay $150 an hour to be treated like a floor tile? So I'm not saying that it is completely in the realms of the upper class. I'm sure that it crosses every stratum there is. But it is predominantly in the elites. And you can see by these stories the hideous connections with all of the people who are in charge of taking care of this world. And maybe that explains an awful lot about the way this world looks right now, where rivers and oceans are polluted beyond the pale, sky and air are polluted, geoengineering, the extermination of animals, the general lack of care and concern for things living. Anyway, with those somber thoughts, I am going to leave you for this evening, but please do remember that we have to face this. We have to realize that this is what's going on so that we will not be fooled in the future. Okay? Because that's what's happened, is that we have been fooled into believing that these people have any position to hold moral sway over anybody. Okay? And when we learn that, we will be free from this insanity. Okay, thank you very much. This is Hound Dog Steve, over and out.